I realize it gets a little confusing week after week because the material, and I was asked about this before we started tonight, none of this exists before we start. And so by God's grace, it has to get written, and sometimes it has to get written whenever there happens to be the inspiration coming, and there's time to actually sit down and try to put it on paper. And then 2 weeks later, in going over it, you realize there's misspelled words, and then there's words that got left out because they were writing it so quickly to try to capture it. And then I realized that I knew what I was talking about, but you're not going to have trouble guessing at what I was talking about. So you enlarge it a little bit, and so that's why we get new ones that come along. When we did the mystagogic Gospel of John, the material already existed. We went through 4 years of doing that and rewriting it before we ever started. And even then we would sometimes make changes and so forth. So it's part of the learning experience. It's part of the doing of this together so that it makes it much more like live television, I guess, doing it this way. So I'm glad that you're here this evening. Again, as we enter into the Thanksgiving season here in the United States, I want to acknowledge again Richard Yeager, who comes and videotapes these, and then we'll do the magic on them so that by tomorrow morning they are available to be posted, and then Charlie Ward, who's able to put them on the YouTube and do that for us as well. And we've had people on the internet that have requested, is there any way to break the sound portion out so that people can then download it on whatever device and they can play it while they're traveling? We had truckers. So Richard is working on all of that kind of technical wizardry, as well as there's something called Amazon Prime where you can now get it on a Fire Stick, whatever that means, and plug it in to your smart television, and you could actually be watching this then in your living room on the television on a big screen rather than being tied down to a computer. So I'm very grateful. This is technology beyond, of course it's beyond me, and it's also beyond my time frame to be able to try to do all of that. So we are very, very grateful for Richard Yeager and for Charlie and the work they're doing. And we continue, of course, to have videos online that Jerry Tolan did years ago for us. And so we're grateful for what they have done that has made this available to people way beyond us that we had no idea that was ever going to happen. Speaking of which, I don't get on YouTube very much. But we're grateful for all those that have found us on YouTube. And every now and then, Richard goes in and prints off the screenshots of comments that are being made by those on YouTube. Those of you that write in to us at the website here, I will get on my computer and I will respond to you, but I don't respond to that on YouTube. But here's just the name, the code name that they wrote by, and if they told us where they were from, I will mention it, but most of them didn't. There's, and this is all since the last time that I gave you an update. This would be October till the present, the last 8 weeks. Joseph Tastic, Jason N., T-Man 123, Gabriel from Connecticut. We're welcoming all of you that are watching us by YouTube, because I haven't welcomed you so far. Muddy Bear from Adelaide, South Australia. Luke in St. Paul, Minnesota. Christian K, Colleen B, Tom B, Oscar AHG, Ivy G, M, Jazz, Kurt H, Sharon K, Jason M, Phil W, Lucy in Queens, New York, David S, And then on our internet, then the reader Nicodemus from Kansas City, Missouri, and Barbara from Chickasha, Oklahoma. So welcome to all of you that are watching us on the internet or YouTube or the website or eventually maybe Amazon Prime, whatever the source. We're glad you have found us and welcome and are part of what we're doing here at St. Elijah. So. And I happened to be going through some material today, and I ran across an envelope that had been mailed in, and it's dated March the 8th, 2019, so this would have been last spring. And we get these. These are on the internet, and I don't usually share them, and maybe I shared this when we got it, but I wanted to share it just one more time to remind us of what is happening, because you're here tonight, and we're going to tape this. There are people watching. Thank you for making the videos that are posted online. I discovered them while searching for information about the Orthodox Church. I watched your introduction to Orthodox, Finding the Church that Jesus Built, Jerry, and then Evangelion, and now I'm working on John the Mystagogic Gospel. Thanks to your videos, my wife and children and me were baptized and or chrismated into the church in January. Like you, I was a Baptist for a long time. It was helpful to hear Orthodox explain from the perspective of someone who knew Christianity the way I knew it. As a token of my gratitude for all you have done for my family and me through your videos, I have included some dry erase markers. I am sure you will put them to good use. Assigned Noah, and Noah, we're still making use of your markers. By the way, we're not soliciting markers or gifts or anything like that, and we don't receive offerings. We do this by God's grace to go out, and from your generosity to someone in your local area is what we would ask of you as well. But thank you for letting us know you are participating and that God is using these. It was never our intent not to be used, but it was never our intent to do anything but make them available to us when we missed. We could go in and catch one up. So we come this evening. This is week number 8, if I counted right, chapter number 7. Let us begin our conclusion. Our conclusion to the first half of Paradise Has Two Trees. The first tree has been our discussion on the tree that we chose. We chose, Adam and Eve chose, the tree for the knowledge of good and evil. And we have been looking at what that meant and what kind of world got created by that tree once we made it the center of the matrix in which we live. And we've looked at all kinds of aspects of that and bringing that kind of to a head last week in our session on the tree of judgment. And so we come tonight on our conclusion to the whole of this first tree, the tree that we have chosen. We have created a good-evil world. This is the world we have chosen to create. We were born into this world. It is the only world we have ever known. We take this world to be normal. We have forgotten this world is not paradise. It is not a world that has been created by the tree of life. The way we see the world around us, and by using the word world, I'm not just talking the physical world. This is the physical world that God created. But what we make of that, how we organize it, how we think of it, the whole matrix, the whole system, the whole whatever mindset, worldview you want to use to describe how we make sense of this physical universe that we're in is what we mean by the word world. It doesn't just mean the physical universe. It means the man-made understanding of the world that we're in and how we organize it. So the world we live in is not a world created by the tree of life. The way we see the world around us, the way we think about the world around us, and the way we know the world around us is the way this tree, the serpent's tree, taught us how to see, how to think, and how to know. The only world we know is a world created by the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. We have forgotten this present world is only the current version of a good-evil world. Every institution, every matrix of thinking, and every dynamic of behavior is shaped and defined by a good-evil paradigm, including religion inside that paradigm. Paradigms can change. You create a different paradigm, but it's a different version of a good-evil world. Whatever memory of the other, the one who exists outside man-made versions of a good-evil world, exists in a memory that is conditioned and formed in terms of mankind's divisions of reality into a good-evil world. Mankind only thinks in good-evil terms. Mankind only remembers in good-evil terms. You see, we think that, okay, there's two trees, there's two different worlds, and we are unaware that once you have the world of good and evil, that you can create all kinds of varieties of worlds based on good and evil. And so it's not like there's only a choice between the tree of life and the tree of good. And once you choose the tree of good and evil, then there's a whole great variety that we end up putting together to create our version of a world based upon good and evil. Man, we have not exhausted in our time together so far an examination of the world in which we have chosen to create. Nor have we included examples from Western culture of the creation and development of our Western version of good-evil world. We could have begun with ancient Greece and Rome, traced it through the Middle Ages, the Renaissance, and the Enlightenment to the present, to show examples of how we created our version of a good-evil world. We didn't have time for that. We're not going to be here for 2 years on the course this time, remember? But we have, at the very least, become aware of the nature and identity of this world that we've chosen to create. At its very essence, we should be familiar with what we're talking about. Well, what the absence reveals. We stand before the tree we have chosen. The one who is reveals his absence to us. He is not here. Now, think of those Spanky and Our Gang shows way back in the 30s. The reruns are on TV. Our Gang, Little Rascals, whatever name they may have gone by. Any group of 10-year-old kids somewhere, a bunch of boys, building their rackety clubhouse and painting on the door, no girls allowed. Now, that does not mean girls cease to exist. It just meant in their little world inside that, no girls allowed. That's what the tree of good and evil says, no God allowed. So when I say God doesn't exist, that's like girls don't exist. No, you can exclude something out of your little world. You can be the ostrich and stick your head in the sand and think no one sees you, but it doesn't change the larger reality. So that's what we're saying and reflecting here. When I say that if you look at our world, the way we've been looking at it, God reveals His absence in that world. He's not there. That doesn't mean He's out on Jupiter or Mars. He's still in the room, just like there were still girls outside that shack that the guys had built. But He's not in our world because we created a godless world. And so He's automatically excluded. Only we forget that in this world, and we're going to look at why. But you see, He doesn't fit in this world. He doesn't belong. He is not containable inside our matrix. His absence reveals life is absent in this tree. It's not in this world. That sign on the door lets me know there's no girls in that world. He is absent in the keeping of the law. We dealt with that last week. His absence reveals there is no life in this tree. There is no life in keeping the law. His absence reveals pleasure is not life. Pleasure does not give life. I'm summarizing what we talked about last week. Pleasure does not bring us life any more than pain gives life. His absence reveals this. Those who desire life, those who desire the one who is life, must seek Him elsewhere. It is not in the keeping of the law that we find Him. Now, if you just happen to catch this tonight, if you're watching on the internet, we're not talking anarchy here. We dealt last week in great length with the issue of law and the function of law and the affirmation of law in these cultures. He who keeps only the law does not find Him. He who keeps the law, by not finding Him there, finds Him by looking elsewhere. If you're looking for something and you discover it's not there, it lets you then go look for Him elsewhere. Wasn't it Edison that said he had not failed 33,000 times or whatever the number was? He had discovered 33,000 things that didn't work. It's that approach. He's not here. I will look for Him elsewhere. In a good-evil world, one fears the presence of their deity. The deity in a good-evil world you're afraid of. In a good-evil world, all know they are sinners in the hands of an angry God. We're going to break a rule, and our deity is going to throw the thunderbolts at us, the lightning bolts. Bzz, we're going to get nailed. We're in trouble. God, you just don't want to get called into the principal's office. It's a world of judgment. In a good-evil world, a God who is absent or gone missing is a good thing. Hey, the boss isn't here today. The cat's away, the mice will play. Absence is a good thing. Presence by the deity, the boss, the figure of power is something to be leery of. But for those who turn aside, like Moses to the burning bush, for those who turn aside, the one in the midst of the blazing bush, the absence of the one who is in their good-evil world is a cause for fear. The presence of the one gives life. His absence signals death. It is not God who brings judgment, but the good-evil tree that cannot give life, that it does not have. It is that tree that can only give death. It gives what it can't give what it doesn't have, life. It can only give what it does have. It is the good-evil tree that causes judgment. The commandments reduce our exposure to death. They do not prevent death, nor do they give life. Culturally, the commandments reduce cultural exposure to cultural death. You're breaking the rules of the tribe, you're in trouble. You're breaking the rules of the community, you're in trouble, either by being shunned, shamed, criticized, etc., etc., etc. All of those movies about the mean girls in high school, you're not part of the clique, the group, and they let you know it by the way they mistreat everyone else. The commandments do not create heaven on earth. That's a summary again of where we were last week. Well, are we afraid of the presence or the absence? The absence of God in the keeping of the commandments is a light blazing within them. We must look elsewhere for the presence of God and the life He gives. It's not in this world. It is not God's presence that we should fear. We should fear His absence. If He is not here, then death is here, masquerading as life. The fear I speak of is the fear we no longer remember. It is the echo of the fear of the absence, not from this version or that version, nor the changing of the absence from one version or that, but the absence itself. The fear we have forgotten is not the fear of a changing world, as frightening as that is, because we're all attached to the good-evil version of the world we grew up in. The fear we have forgotten is not the fear of a changing world. The primal fear is the fear of the absence of the one who is. There is a primal fear that God is gone. Within every changing version of our man-made world, we change it all we want. Every version has the absence of God because it's a good-evil world. When the presence is eliminated by us from the good-evil world we create, we replace the presence with absence and disguise the absence with some kind of fake presence. Culture after culture created its version of the good-evil world, each version filled with their man-made deities, the absence masquerading as deities. Man-made presences hiding that there is no presence within this systemic good-evil version. On occasion, the masquerade is up. Fear begins to grow as the awareness of the absence creeps in, as the glue that holds a culture together fails, and the culture begins coming apart at the seams. Sometimes a Constantine replaces the masquerading deities with a new one, even a genuine, as Constantine did when he chose a new deity for his capital, New Rome, Constantinople. The old Rome in Italy rejected the new Rome and created its own version of Constantine's new god, upon which to rebuild old Rome and old Rome's Western culture. The good-evil world of the old Rome, with its old Roman gods reinvented itself as the new old Rome, with its its own version of Constantine's new god, and thus gave birth to both Western Christianity and Western Christianity. You see, we can create our world, and we don't want anybody to know that there's no God in it, so we're going to invent a God. And so when even the true God comes along and somebody embraces that true God within some kind of system, it gets reinterpreted inside a system, inside the culture of that system, and then it gets rejected by someone else and gets modified. And so the city of Rome didn't like the fact there was a new Rome. And they really didn't like the fact that there was a new God in the city of the new Rome. But they couldn't really get the old gods, Mars and that god of war, and this would have never happened, and they're trying to get the old gods back. Augustine won't let them, and that's what the city of God is. It's a defense of Christianity in the West. But Augustine gives them a modified version of the God of the East. And so the old Rome will take the God of the new Rome and will twist him around and modify him. So the old Rome, with its new modified version of a God, creates a new system in the Western culture, and Western Christianity to boot in the process, creating this wonderful good-evil version of a Christian world based on legalism all the way through. Don't have time to go in it, but that's what we're talking about, this changing of systems to disguise the fact God's not in the system, as much as we try to talk about him in the system. Well, exchanging the masquerade. 1,500 years ago, it should say. 1,500 years later, after Constantine, 1882, Friedrich Nietzsche realized that Western culture had murdered its deity. Living in the middle of the Enlightenment, Nietzsche extrapolated into the future where Descartes' rationalism, Hume's empiricism, and Delametre's man the machine was taking Western culture. God was now redundant. There was no need for a God. We could now explain the world by ourselves. Inside their rational, good-evil world of the Enlightenment, no deity was now needed to account for mankind. In 1882, Nietzsche announced, God is dead. Only his shadow remained. Nietzsche realized, like the death of Buddha, that God's shadow might still exist in caves for thousands of years to come. But that's all it was, the shadow of a dead God. Nietzsche acknowledged there would be those happy ones, the celebrants of the happy science. We philosophers and free spirits feel when we hear the news that the old God is dead, as if a new dawn shone upon us. Our heart overflows with gratitude, amazement, premonitions, expectation. At long last, the horizon appears free to us again. Even if it should not be bright, at long last our ships may venture out again, venture out to face any danger. All the daring of the lover of knowledge is permitted again. The sea, our sea, lies open again. Perhaps there has never yet been such an open sea. Like the scene in the film Independence Day, when the crowd dances on top of a skyscraper, welcoming the coming of the alien spacecraft that is hovering overhead, those celebrating the death of their cultural gods welcome the coming future as liberators who have toppled the dictators from power. But also, like the same scene in that movie, Nietzsche foresaw that the future might not be benevolent liberators, but the harbingers of destruction. He experienced by anticipation and gave voice to experiencing the death of a culture. The madman jumped into their midst and pierced them with his eyes. "Whither is God?" he cried. "I will tell you, we have killed him, you and I. All of us are his murderers." But how did we do this? How could we drink up the sea? Who gave us the sponge to wipe away the entire horizon? What were we doing when we unchained this earth from its sun? Whither is it moving now? Whither are we moving? Away from all suns? Are we not plunging continually, backward, sideward, forward, lurching in all directions? Is there still any up or down? Are we not straying as through an infinite nothing? Do we not feel the breath of empty space? Has it not become colder? Is not night continually closing in on us? Do we not need to light lanterns in the morning? Do we hear nothing as yet of the noise of the gravediggers who are burying God? Do we smell nothing as yet of the divine decomposition? Gods too decompose. God is dead. God remains dead, and we have killed him. If you experience the chilling death of a culture and the death of the morality that defined what was good and evil inside a culture, and the collapse of that to be replaced by what? The happy people rejoice, let's go create our brave new world. Nietzsche foresaw you can also create hell and destruction in the process. How shall we comfort ourselves, the murderers of all murderers? What was holiest and mightiest of all that the world has yet owned has bled to death under our knives. Who will wipe this blood off us? What water is there for us to clean ourselves? What festivals of atonement, what sacred games shall we have to invent? Is not the greatness of this deed too great for us? Must we ourselves not become gods simply to appear worthy of it? There has never been a greater deed, and whoever is born after us, for the sake of this deed, will belong to a higher history than all history hitherto. Here the madman fell silent and looked again at his listeners, and they too were silent and stared at him in astonishment. At last he threw his lantern on the ground, and it broke into pieces and went out. "I have come too early," he said then. "My time is not yet. This tremendous event is still on its way, still wandering. It has not yet reached the ears of men. Lightning and thunder require time. The light of the stars require time. Deeds, though done, still require time to be seen and heard. This deed is still more distant from them than the most distant stars, and yet they have done it themselves." In other words, God died a long time ago, but now his death is just now reaching our ears. We are just now becoming aware of this deed that happened 1,500 years ago when Augustine wrote The City of God, when we started to create Western culture, a world without a God, an invented God, and now that we are killing that invented God, what is about to happen? We're dealing with man-made systems, the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, and what happens when you change from one to the other, when you throw out one and create another. Doesn't happen every day. Sometimes it's every 500 years. It may be a couple thousand years. When absence turns violent, France. In the 1700s, Western Europe deified human reason and replaced the God of Western Christianity with deified reason and gave birth to the Enlightenment. The implications of the age of reason, the Enlightenment, when mankind threw off the darkness of superstition and religion and entered into the light of human reason, were seen quite clearly by Nietzsche. Delametres had published L'Homme Machine, Man and Machine, anonymously. He knew in 1747 when he published it, the implication of his ideas made God redundant and was too forceful and too premature for society at that time. When his identity was discovered for having written the book, he was forced to leave Catholic France. As late as 1766, the far more famous author Jean-Jacques Rousseau was expelled from France for atheism. All of these were Enlightenment thinkers. The founding apostle of deified reason, Voltaire, was himself deified by France upon his return to France after 27 years in exile. His death a few months later was followed by the beginning of the French Revolution, a revolution fathered by Voltaire. The glorious revolution has been the fruit of his works. Voltaire's body was entombed in the French pantheon of the Grand Homes, the great men. Unknown to France, when it expelled the apostles of the Enlightenment, its Catholic churches were already the tombs and sepulchres of God. In less than 30 years, once they exiled them, Voltaire was gone 27 when they first exiled him. In less than 30 years, the French Revolution and its reign of terror began as France unchanged itself from the sun and plunged continually backward, sideward, forward in all directions. Was there still any up or down as France stumbled and strayed as through an infinite nothing? 250,000 died in the French Revolution. 10 years. The reign of terror, 10 months of terror. The de-Christianization of France had begun. Monasteries were devastated. Monastic vows were forbidden. Nuns were required to wear secular clothing. Priests and bishops were murdered. In less than a year, it's going to be 10 months, September 1793 to July 1794, an estimated 40,000 people were executed, with almost 17,000 of them by guillotine in Paris. Included in that number of the 17,000 on the guillotine were 16 female monastics, who each, after asking for permission to die, climbed the steps to the guillotine singing. The mob that had gathered for its customary fun, however, was soon reduced to stunned silence by the action of the Carmelites. The women religious did not cower in fear before the blade of the guillotine. Rather, they sang as each one mounted the steps to her death. William Bush argues that they sang Psalm 117, "O praise the Lord, all ye nations, praise him, all ye people. For his mercy is confirmed upon us, and the truth of the Lord remains forever. Praise the Lord." The first to sing as she ascended was the youngest of the Carmelites, Sister Constance. Called by the executioners, she knelt before the Mother Superior, asked her blessing and permission to die, and then placed herself beneath the guillotine without any need of assistance or by force. Each of the remaining nuns followed in exactly the same manner. The next to last was 34-year-old Sister Henrietta. An infirmarian, she assisted her sisters up the steps. And finally, the Venerable Mother placed her head in the device and waited for the blade to chop. During the executions, no sounds could be heard, save the singing of the sisters, their chorus reduced one by one, and the remorseless slicing of the guillotine. The customary drum roll did not take place, and no one in the crowd cheered, laughed, or mocked the victims. When it was done, the crowd dispersed in further silence, and a pervasive sense of unease settled over the city of Paris. The remains of the sisters were taken away from Paris and interred in a deep sand pit in a cemetery, where they joined the other victims of the guillotine. The murder of the Carmelites was the climactic moment of the Reign of Terror, and its apparently greatest victory over the superstition and the church. And yet, within 10 days, Robespierre fell from power and died himself beneath the guillotine, and the Reign of Terror was brought to a sudden and unexpected end. In its de-Christianization of France, the French Revolution had created a new calendar of 10-day weeks, 3 weeks per month, 12 months a year, with 5 or 6 added days at the end of the year as needed to complete an astronomical year. The Jewish Sabbath and the Christian Lord Day were now expunged. A so-called week was now 10 days long. Everyone worked 9 days and was off 1. The 7-day week was replaced with the 10-day decade. On the 17th of July, 1794, 15 times as each one's turn came, each nun. They were all singing in unison together. Each nun interrupted her singing as she knelt before the prioress. Permission to die, mother. Go, my daughter. 15 times each had risen, still singing their song as they climbed the steps of the guillotine. Finally, the last one, still singing, mounted the steps. Silence echoed across the scene. 10 days later, that new French anti-God decade later, inexplicably, the reign of terror ended. When the absence turns violent, Germany and Russia. 90 years after the martyrdom of the Carmelite nuns who went to their death singing, Nietzsche stood looking into the future across the German landscape. The Lutheran and Catholic churches of Germany were unaware. They had become tombs and sepulchres of a God that was now dead in German culture. Did he see beyond the borders and foresee the extermination of the sacred in Orthodox Russia? Did Nietzsche's vision include the extermination of the sacred in the United States by the 21st century? The reign of terror he saw coming was far greater than the prelude in France. In the world Nietzsche saw coming, Lenin, Stalin, Hitler, and Mao would reduce Robespierre to little more than a footnote. It would take million more martyrs to quell the reigns of terror the 20th century held for mankind. The collapse of one good-evil system and its replacement with a new and different good-evil system comes at a great price. Like Sherman's march to the sea in the American Civil War, the good-evil version known as the Enlightenment continues its methodical march, replacing the old good-evil version of Western culture and its Western Christian God. There are those who rejoice. There are those who joyfully declare regarding humans, there are only atoms. Everything else is merely social work. There are those who joyfully embrace what Nietzsche said would come. Having exterminated God, mankind must now fill the vacuum and become God ourselves. Must we ourselves not become gods simply to appear worthy of it? Having exterminated God, we now strive to take his place. The most common reaction of the human mind to achievement is not satisfaction, but craving for more. Humans are always on the lookout for something better, bigger, tastier. When humankind possesses enormous new powers, and when the threat of famine, plague, and war is finally lifted, what will we do with ourselves? What will scientists, investors, bankers, and presidents do all day? Write poetry? Success breeds ambition, and our recent achievements are now pushing mankind to set itself even more daring goals. Having secured unprecedented levels of prosperity, health, and harmony, And given our past record and our current values, humanity's next targets are likely to be immortality, happiness, and divinity. Having reduced mortality from starvation, disease, and violence, we will now aim to overcome old age and even death itself. Having saved people from abject mystery, we will now aim to make them positively happy. Having raised humanity above the beastly level of survival struggles, we will now aim to upgrade humans into gods and turn Homo sapiens into Homo Deus. Having always behaved as our own God, we will have completely eliminated the need for the one who is in our lives. Well, when the absence turns violent, the United States and Western culture, we live in such a time as Nietzsche spoke. The overthrow of the good-evil world based on Western Christianity has made its way from France and Germany through Russia and now finds itself holding the upper hand in the United States and all Western culture. The God of Western culture is pronounced dead, and those shouting the news are giddy with the prospects of a new age of freedom, symbolized by multi-sexuality, gender equality, as a new system of right and wrong replaces the old system of good and evil of Western Christianity. Well, when the future repeats the past, when Nietzsche's madman realized what they had done and the coming of a world of their own making, he gave voice to the madman of every epoch, the madman who stood on the brink of the suicide by one man-made version of the good-evil world and the birthing of its replacement with a new man-made version of the good-evil world. The madman sees the joy of anticipation by some and the great and painful price to be paid by all. Nietzsche gave voice to the clairvoyant madman of every changing epoch. However, he did much more. Nietzsche gave voice to the deepest cry of our humanity, the cry of our ancestor Adam, whose voice we carry in our own ontological DNA. Adam is the clairvoyant. He is the madman. This is Adam standing before the tree he has chosen to base his life upon. This is Adam, having tasted the fruit, its delicious delights turning sour in his mouth. He understands what he has done. To what Nietzsche gives voice, Edvard Munch gives a face in his painting, whose German title is Der Schrei der Natur, the Scream of Nature, and the Norwegian title is Shriek. In English, it is known as The Scream. The original German title, The Scream of Nature, points us back to the beginning of Adam's choice, and the scream shrieking forth through all his being, through all of human nature once the choice was made, what have I done? You have the picture of the scream in front of you. Listen to the silent scream echoing forth from Adam as he stands in front of the tree he has chosen, as he realizes, as he sees far into a never-ending repetitive future of successive good, evil worlds, and knows this is what I have done. This is of my own making. I have done it myself. I have done it to myself. It is Adam screaming in Munch painting. It is Adam speaking through Nietzsche's madman. Scarcely had Adam swallowed the proffered fruit before he knew what he had never known before and saw what he had never seen before. Adam looked around blinded, now seeing what his sight had not seen, realizing the future now before him. "Whither is God?" he cried. "I will tell you. We have killed him, you and I. All of us are his murderers. But how did we do this? How could we drink up the sea who gave us the sponge to wipe away the entire horizon? What were we doing when we unchanged this earth from its sun? Whither is it now moving? Whither are we moving? Away from all suns? Are we not plunging continually? Backward, sideward, forward, in all directions. Is there still any up or down? Are we not straying as through an infinite nothing? Do we not feel the breath of empty space? Has it not become colder? Is not night continually closing upon us? Do we not need to light lanterns in the morning? Do we hear nothing as yet of the noise of the gravediggers who are burying God? Do we smell nothing as yet of the divine decomposition? God's too decomposed. God is dead. God remains dead. And we have killed him in this world we've now created. How shall we comfort ourselves, the murderers of all murderers? What was holiest and mightiest of all, that the world has yet owned, has bled to death under our knives. Who will wipe this blood off us? What water is there too for us to clean ourselves? What festivals of atonement? What sacred games shall we have to invent? Is not the greatness of this deed too great for us? Must we ourselves not now become gods simply to appear worthy of it? There has never been a greater deed, and whoever is born after us for the sake of this deed will belong to a higher history, a different history than all the history heretofore. That's Adam predicting the future. At this, Adam fell silent, looked again at his wife, an unborn son and daughters, and they too were silent and stared at him in astonishment. At last he shook his head, knowing those are not yet born, those not born, no more knew of which he spoke than he had before he tasted of that fateful fruit. I have come too early. I have spoken too soon, he said to them. The time is not yet. This tremendous event is still on its way, not the death of God, but becoming aware of the death of God that we have done. It has not yet reached the ears of men. Lightning and thunder require time. The light of the stars requires time. Deeds, though done, still require time to be seen and heard. This deed is still more distant from them than the most distant stars, and yet we have done it ourselves. We have done it, and done it to ourselves. Along with Adam, we now sing, I wish I didn't know now what I didn't know then. I wish I could start all over again. We have made our choice. We now know what we have chosen to know. We divide everything into good and bad, right and wrong, good and evil. We are judgmentalists. We judge everything and everyone. We like those who like what we like. We despise those who don't. Judgmentalism infects us individually. It also infects us socially, politically, economically. It infects us sexually and racially. It infects us locally, nationally, and internationally. It infects us culturally. Every relationship we have individually and corporately is determined by and infected with judgmentalism. This is our knowledge. The only way we know how to behave is judgmentally. The history of the human race is based on someone, some tribe, some nation, some culture, judging themselves good and righteous, and everyone and everything else as bad and evil. Judgmentalism infects religion inside the good-evil world. Religion in a good-evil world is based on whether one is good or bad. Those who are good are rewarded with heaven, nirvana, or some other man-made version of, it doesn't get any better than this. Those who are bad are punished eternally with the torments of a burning hell. Even Christians in a good-evil world translate, interpret, and filter everything spoken by the one who is through the filter of a good-evil set of ears. We may have ears with which to hear, but they are good-evil ears. They only hear what God says in good-evil terms. Every one of us has eaten from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. This is the world we live in. This is how we hear. This is how we see. This is how we know. This is how we behave. It is the only way we know how to live. There is no other way of knowing and no other way known by mankind of how to live. Or is there? Well, we're going to take the month of December off, and we're going to come back the first Monday in the new year. That'll be January the 6th, 2020, and discover whether or not that other tree that didn't get chosen is still there.
Thank you, Jesus.
Now that's a good one.
You see, what we've just done is we've discovered the choice that got made. It's not some abstract choice that happened a long time ago. It's a choice we live in. And we are all infected by it. And the absence of God in it should frighten us. And if this is all there is, if there is no other way of living except this way, God help us. Well, what a downer. But maybe it's not a downer, because you see, you can't hear the good news until you finally confess the bad news. We have to admit the truth about who we are, all of us, the world we're in, all of us. There's no one righteous, no, not one. We're going to be able to explore the new tree in the new year. Now, we're going to take our break. I realize I went a little longer, but that's where we needed to get to. Let's take a break and enjoy relaxing, and let's come back and let's just chat for a second. Can we do that? All right, let's take our break. Thanks. I appreciate you being here and your faithfulness to come. And I'm hopeful that you wouldn't be here if it wasn't getting something out of it. I don't think I'm the only one, and I would certainly hate to think that I'm having all this much fun at your expense. When we started, I told you we didn't know where we were going, and that's the truth. I mean, we kind of had a tentative agenda, but so tentative, none of this was mapped out. And for me personally, I can't believe what we've seen, where all this took us. I had no idea at all, and so I am tickled, delighted to have gotten to be on this trip with you, and for us together to see what we've seen. And I want you to know that. Now, see, I know I'm a nobody. I mean, I'm just me having the time of my life, getting to go on these journeys. This is just. I really mean it when I say I hate to have this much fun at your expense. It's really. To come to that conclusion tonight of what we came to and saw that it's been Adam, and this is, look at this. Because it's so easy to think that there's a normal world, and then there's a choice to either be good or evil, and there's bad people and there's good people, but the world is normal. And it's when the bad people take over that the world becomes abnormal. And we only think of Hitler as a bad person and created a bad world and I'm going, that's been completely, finally we've seen through that and seen the good evil world for what it is, and that's all there is. One man-made version versus another man-made version, one power group trying to impose their version on a different group. This has nothing to do with being punished by a deity. This has nothing to do with any of that. This world that we have just described being the world that we're in for the last our 8 weeks together, would cause that painting of the scream. If that's the world we're in trouble. We're always going to be in trouble, and we better pray for the peace of the world and the powers that be, so that in their peace we've got peace. I don't care what, and the church always has. It didn't matter where the church is, under what regime. We prayed for that regime to have peace so we could have peace within it. That's the reality of living in this kind of, and so that to know that we are trapped in this world, and to think that this is all there is would be, well, Joanna said if there wasn't an option, she'd just go home and slit her wrist. Hyperbole if you're listening, watching. But you get it. I mean, if that's all there is, I don't even want to keep dancing. I mean, but to then know that that's not beating somebody over the head with God. That's not beating somebody over the head with hell or any kind of that good-evil punishment system. It's just, all of us just wake up. I don't care who you are, your politics, your anything. This is the truth about us. And if there is no other option, then this is all there is. And all the masquerades of deities we want to invent just help disguise it. Or the glory of the cause, whatever that cause is. And so it's kind of nice, I think, we're going to take December off and we're going to celebrate the alternative. the birth of Christ. And I have no idea where the second half goes. I know where we start, but I don't know where it's going to go. But I am really excited about, if there's an answer, I want to hear it. If there's an alternative to what we've just discovered, I'm all ears. And so I'm really thankful for having the chance to do this. And had you not gone on this journey with us together, I wouldn't have gone. I couldn't have gone. There would have been nothing. It couldn't have happened. So we're in this together, and those watching are in this together. It's just, I can't believe we get to do that. We get to show up on Monday nights and do this, and are willing to sacrifice to come and do it. So I really, really want to thank you from the bottom of my heart for being willing to do this and to come week after week. So God bless you. Have a wonderful month of December. And I look forward to seeing us, and anyone else that wants to start at that point is, of course, welcome to come. And we'll start in the second half of this journey together. So thank you, and God bless you.